Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys here today with the young crowd. Reed Darcey here to my left, Koki Riley to my extreme left. These two gentlemen are here to talk a little bit of LSU baseball and a little bit of LSU basketball, of course, because, well, it's that time. It's that time. LSU's about to begin baseball practice, obviously. And then, of course, LSU women's basketball is getting ready for the big dukeroo versus South Carolina on Thursday, 7 o'clock Thursday on ESPN at the Pete Maravich Assembly Center. Gentlemen, how you guys doing?
Wonderful. It's a huge game, huge day.
Yep.
A lot going on, especially baseball season right around the corner. Don't forget about baseball season.
Yeah, sure is, Koki. I know you're fired up. You're a baseball guy. That's why we brought you in. So,
best sport in the world.
Yeah. So here we are. We will talk about LSU and South Carolina here in a little bit, but first a bit of business. Obviously, you know that the Advocate has always been the number one place for LSU baseball coverage, LSU basketball, LSU football, everything under the sun LSU related. So please subscribe to The Advocate. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And to stay up to date with everything, all the latest headlines, please go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That way you get a hold of our LSU newsletter. It's a daily newsletter. Scott Rabelais handles that 3 times a week. So please get a hold of that. We are here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever other finer podcasts are found. And, of course, we are brought to you today and every day by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies, please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, we are here. We're going to talk about LSU baseball first, I guess, because practice is going to open up here in less than 24 hours. We're here on Thursday discussing LSU baseball, and, of course, VMI versus LSU. That'll be the first game of the season on February 16th. And practice will begin in earnest for that season opener and for the season in general. So here we are, national champions coming back to try to repeat. It's going to be a different looking team to some degree. Obviously, Dylan Cruz gone, Paul Skeen's gone, and some of the other stars. But well, we will start with that. We will start with all things LSU baseball, and beginning with the LSU rotation. Tell us a little bit, Koki, about where the LSU starting rotation stands.
Yeah, LSU has a lot of options, but I think there's 3 guys that have kind of, risen to the top with that. It's Luke Holman, the right-handed pitcher and Alabama transfer. One, Thatcher Hurd, who's coming back from last season, who closed out the national championship game, of course. Game 3 of the national championship series, but that basically became the national championship game, I guess. And Gage Jump, who's also a transfer from UCLA, who came in this past offseason. Left-handed pitcher, missed the last year and a half roughly due to Tommy John surgery, but got the pitch throughout the entire fall because he had that long, recovery timeline. So, I think those 3 guys have kind of risen to the top. Johnson's been very enthusiastic about Jump in particular. And when you look at Holman, it's hard to argue that he shouldn't be in the rotation since he was one of the best pitchers in the SEC last year as well. So I think those 3 guys have sort of, I would be surprised if those aren't the 3 guys to be in the starting rotation at the start of the year.
So tell us a little bit more about Holman and tell us a little bit about Jump. We obviously assume that Thatcher Hurd must have played a role, or for that matter, Jay Johnson's relationship with some of these Pac-12 guys must have had a role to play in getting him here to Baton Rouge.
Yeah, and it probably didn't help that Thatcher and Jump played together for a season, the season that Jump eventually got hurt. So you can tell that they have at least some sort of relationship there. We're going to see to what extent, obviously, as we go throughout the season. But yeah, I think those 2 guys are definitely going to be big parts of the rotation for them. It Jumps a left-handed pitcher, obviously, so he kind of gives them a slightly different look from the starter role. And we'll get later. We can talk a little bit about how many lefties they actually have in general, which is a lot. And then with Holman, I mean, like mid 3, low 3 ERA last season at Alabama was probably their best starting pitcher. And you know, talented guy from the right-handed side, probably going to be a top 2 or 3 round pick. So there's a lot to look forward to when it comes to LSU's rotation. They just have a lot of options. You know, it's those 3 guys rise to the top. A lot of it's because of their resumes and, you know, their experience and their stuff. But they have a lot of guys who could start in any other rotation, like a guy like Griffin Herring, a guy like Nate Ackenhausen, even Cam Johnson, if there was 97 from the left side, and he's just a freshman. So just a lot of options for this team.
Speaking of which, it's as you know, and as many LSU baseball fans know, it's actually fairly rare that the starting weekend rotation at the beginning of the season winds up being the same starting rotation at the end of the season. To that end, you mentioned Nate Ackenhausen, who obviously played a huge role in LSU's run to the national championship in May and June. But just go through some of the better options, either in the for now, coming out of the bullpen, and potentially, you know, being starting pitchers should something happen to these other 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah, I mean, they have a guy like Griffin Herring who technically didn't start during their College World Series run, but kind of did at the same time. What was it, like 4 or 5 innings against Wake Forest? He pitched excellently, and Nate Ackenhausen did start against Tennessee, and that was the first their 3 wins in 3-day run. And I mean, again, like when you bring guys like that back, you expect them to be weekend starters, and because of what they've added from the transfer portal, that's not going to be the case, or at least the start of the season, as you said. But they're excellent options, and Jay Johnson told me like he would trust those guys with his life, and I mean, he's already shown that literally at the College World Series, so that makes sense to me. And they just have a lot of other options. I don't think Gavin Guidry will ever be like a starting option for them, because I can't really see him going more than like 2 or 3 innings, honestly. But he was obviously a top reliever for them last year. He's coming back. He'll also do some infield work and be like a pinch runner, pinch hitter sort of option for them. At least this is what Johnson told me. So you have him as probably your top right-handed reliever. You have Cam Johnson, who I mentioned. You have Justin Lohr, who's a left-handed pitcher, transferred from Xavier. He had like I want to say like low 2, mid 2 ERA last season. He was really excellent for them in the Big East. And yeah, there's just a lot of different options like that. Jay Johnson very high on a guy like Aiden Moffitt, who didn't pitch a lot last season at all, but in the little that he did pitch, it thrown up to 95 miles an hour. Seems like he's a pretty talented kid. Christian Little comes back from last year's team. Yeah, there's just a lot of options. Cade Anderson, another left-handed freshman. Jay Johnson thought he would have gotten picked in the draft if it weren't for Tommy John surgery that, you know, kind of wiped out his senior season. So yeah, they have just a lot of quality options in that bullpen, especially.
You had a long story about Cam Johnson during this preseason that's up at theadvocate.com. Tell you know, for those who don't know much about him, tell us a little bit about what Cam Johnson, why he's such a highly regarded prospect.
There's quite a few reasons, and one, like Cam Johnson, he's a 6'4" left-handed pitcher. Kind of has that intimidating mound presence and that, you know, that length to make the ball, you know, that sort of deception where the ball's coming in faster than it looks. And the ball's already coming in fast. It's coming in at 95, 96, 97 miles an hour. And that's just really rare to see from the left side, especially from a freshman. And that's why he was regarded as probably the best freshman not to sign with an MLB team in the draft. A perfect game as him as number 1 freshman coming into this season. He was a top 40 prospect in the MLB draft among all prospects. That includes Dylan Cruz, that includes Paul Skeens, that includes some of the other top high school guys. So he's a very, 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 very talented guy who rarely see a player like that get through the draft process. And the idea of the story that I did was that I wanted to see why that happened in the first place. And I think there's a lot of interesting insight as to why that was the case.
And while we're on the bullpen, Koki, you were at Jay Johnson's visit to the Rotary Club yesterday, from what I understand. And,
yes.
I saw Jay told a pretty funny story. Would you like to share that story?
Yeah. So last season, I mean, if a lot of LSU fans probably remember this. LSU blew a 9-run lead to Mississippi State to lose that series, lose back-to-back SEC series. I mean, Mississippi State was not a very good team last year. They missed the SEC tournament altogether. And someone at least, put a for sale sign up on Jay Johnson's front yard, which is pretty
insane.
Pretty insane. That's unhinged, I'd say. Jay didn't make a big deal out of it. He just threw it away and didn't really think about the incident again. But I guess he sort of brought it up during the Rotary Club meeting yesterday and said it was kind of a missed opportunity for him, because if he had kept the sign and after they'd won the College World Series and gotten back from Omaha, he could have signed it and gave it back to the guy who put it on his front yard in the first place. So just a kind of funny and quirky story.
It's indicative, though, of LSU's, I've often said it's very difficult to explain this to somebody who's not from Louisiana, because everywhere else in the United States, college basketball is the number 2 sport on a given campus, and it's number 2, with a bullet. Here at LSU baseball is such a big deal that it's number 2, and sometimes it's number 1, depending on the
year,
certain segment of the fan base that you're talking about. It's just interesting. I don't know of any other place that would be so fired up about LSU baseball or their specific schools baseball program that would be so fired up that they would be bothering with putting up a for sale sign on the coach's yard.
Koki, you were in Omaha. I mean, you saw it, over the summer. That place turned into Baton Rouge. And the reason I brought up, that story from Jay, the for sale sign, the reason they lost the Mississippi State series was the bullpen, right? Blowing that lead, the bullpen at one point last year, it was a big issue, and they sort of solved it. So given the depth of the team this year, would you say that the bullpen might be the biggest difference, from last year to this year, or what's different about that part of the team?
On paper, yes. At the very least, on paper, the bullpen is just a lot deeper than last year's team. And I will say, I think at least personally, a lot of the success that they had in Omaha was the fact that they had a lot of pitchers who were fly ball pitchers. And in Omaha, that's a big ballpark, especially when the wind's blowing in.
Yep.
It bounced down a lot of those fly balls, and it just played into a lot of the guys that they have. And Ackenhausen and Herring, especially Ty Floyd, and you saw that with all the strikeouts that he had. Floyd obviously got better, and his stuff was incredible in that game 1, but it also helped that he throws a lot of high fastballs, forcing fly balls that were inevitably caught. But yeah, like I think they're going to give up some runs at some points during the year, just because, again, the SEC, it's a lot of small parks, a lot of home runs. You saw that with the success of not just LSU, but a lot of other teams in the SEC. So I think the key to this season is their offense has to still be a really good unit, because it's hard to survive in the SEC if you don't have that.
Before we get to the offense, just to sort of put a little exclamation point on the pitching staff and on the bullpen in particular, I remember this would have been 5 years ago. I'm not mistaken, the 2019 team, Paul Maneri came in with one left-handed pitcher, a guy named Easton McMurray. And Easton McMurray, God bless him, but he wound up having to have Tommy John basically before the season really even started. And so that left the LSU pitching staff with no left-handers whatsoever. And now this fast forward 5 years, and LSU has a veritable stable of left-handers, not only in the starting rotation and potential starting rotation, but also in the bullpen too. I know Jay Johnson has spoken about that and has spoken about his sort of desire and priority to have that kind of pitching from the left side. If you just want to sort of expand on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think they have 8 or 9 I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I think they have like 8 or 9 left-handed pitchers on this team, which is a stark contrast from what they've had the last 2 years, especially the first year Jay was here, when they really only had 1 or 2 guys that you could rely on from the left-handed side.
Yep.
And it's not just that they have, I think last year they had 4. This year they have, again, 8 or 9. And it's not just that they have a bunch of left-handed pitchers. They have a bunch of left-handed pitchers who have different strengths and different styles, right? Like Griffin Herring's very different to Cam Johnson. And Cam Johnson himself is something that they've never had since Jay Johnson has gotten here. It's hard to find any team that has a guy like Cam
It's
Johnson.
very rare to have any left-hander throwing 96, 97 from the
unless
left
you're in the
side.
major leagues.
That's
And
right.
there's probably some major league teams that lack a guy with that sort of ceiling as a pitcher. And so, yeah, like when you have that many left-handed options, it's almost like they almost lack right-handed options. They have so many left-handed options on this team. So it's really remarkable. I mean, I mentioned Kate Anderson. I mentioned Justin Lohr. Even DJ Primo, who was a guy who redshirted last season, a guy who Jay Johnson's been pretty high on heading into this year. He's another left-handed option. It's just a lot. They just have a lot of lefties, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they sort of mix and match all these guys and how they deploy all these different options.
So speaking of different options, LSU has made, and Jay Johnson has made a concerted effort to try to get his best guys on the field, whether that's on the mound or just elsewhere in the field. You've had several stories about this, but just take us through the lineup a little bit, specifically as it relates to changes position to position. And I'm thinking first, certainly about a Pearson going to second base. But we'll go from there. I'll let you just sort of go from there.
It's probably easiest if we just go position by position. I mean, at catcher, just to start there, I think the starting job's going to be somewhere. It's going to be between Alex Milazzo and Brady Neal. My lean is Brady Neal right now, just because he started at the beginning of last season. Johnson very high on him.
One way or the other, though, they're probably as deep at catcher as any team in the nation, right?
Yes, because you have a third option. That's Hayden Travinski, who I think is going to be the DH and the primary DH. And Johnson told me that, and that's something that just kind of makes sense given Travinski is very good at throwing out runners, but he's not the greatest in terms of blocking low pitches and framing and that sort of stuff. It's Milazzo and Neal. It's kind of they're a little bit stronger in that regard. So I think those two guys get the primary catching spots, but the one, I guess, sort of curveball with this is that Neal, they've also been working with Brady in terms of giving him some reps at second base, giving him some reps at third base, giving him some reps in the outfield, particularly the corner outfield spots. So they want to at least give him more versatility, to give him more opportunity in the lineup. And it's important because he's a left-handed hitter. This team kind of lacks left-handed hitting. It's not like a major need, but it's something to sort of keep an eye out for as we go along this season. So keeping his bat in the order as much as possible, I think, is going to be a priority for Johnson. And plus, he missed a lot of last season. I mean, the second half of last year, he was out with a back injury, re-aggravated that back injury in the summer.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see sort of like his progression as the season goes along. First base, I think you're looking at Jared Jones, kind of with a bullet point, to be honest with you. They're going to need him to have a pretty big season and fill some of the home runs that they're losing from Cade Beloso, from Dylan Cruz, even from Trey Morgan.
Yep.
He's their power option for them. Second base, Josh Pearson's moving from the outfield to second base. That's kind of like the big change lineup-wise this season. Obviously, he was an excellent corner outfielder for them in left field, and they're going to see how he works out at second next to Michael Braswell, who's going to be the shortstop. He's a South Carolina transfer. Working on a story about him right now about some of the offensive progress that he's trying to make. Hopefully that comes out tomorrow. Really, really interested to see how his season goes. Third base, Tommy White, that's
taken care of.
Yeah, exactly. Don't have to explain much of that one. Left field is probably the one position that's probably the most up in the air right now. After the fall, I think Coach Johnson said Jake Brown was probably the favorite for that spot. But Zeb Ruddle, who redshirted last season, is another option for them. He's another left-handed hitter. Jake Brown's a left-handed hitter. He's also a left-handed pitcher. So if we're talking about that theme of versatility, right? Yes. They have a guy in Brown who can also play first base. He can play corner outfield. He's a left-handed pitcher. He's only a freshman as well. And then Ethan Fry, who's an option for them at DH, and he's probably the fourth string catcher and can play all the outfield spots. He's a guy who can play out there as well, potentially. Center field's probably going to be Mac Bingham, Arizona transfer. Obviously, the Jay Johnson connection with Arizona. Center fielder, good defender, hit 360 last season. And then in right field, you're probably looking at Paxton Kling, who's the athleticism to play center field and played a lot at the beginning of last year. Didn't play as much toward the end, but is definitely another one of those guys who they need to step up and play really well this season.
Another player who was very highly regarded coming in,
Yes,
as a freshman. So a lot of changes for the LSU lineup, but certainly they've got guys, for lack of a better way to put it. So anything before we close out and turn our attention to women's basketball? Anything that stands out to you? Anything you're looking for specifically as LSU begins practice here in less than 24 hours?
Yeah, no, I hit on more or less everything. I gotta say, I think we more or less hit on everything.
We went up and down a lot. We did.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see, especially how the bullpen shakes out. And
yeah,
so if you have any questions,
I have one burning question if we have time. Dylan Cruz, obviously center field. You lose Dylan Cruz. You can't replace him at all. But in the podcast that you did with Jay Johnson, I thought he said something interesting when he said last season Cruz was responsible for about 3 runs a game or something like that. So I was curious, like, was Jay, when he said that, was he like estimating or was he, exaggerating, or do they have like an actual number that quantifies that?
I think that was probably a slight exaggeration.
Yeah.
It probably felt like he's worth 3 runs a game. And there are probably games where he was worth more than 3 runs a game. That was probably more of a guess. I guess the best way to put that was like a guesstimate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe a slight overreaction. But I do think, like, having Tommy and Dylan next to each other or near each other in the order had kind of like a knock-on effect, right? When you have 2 hitters who are that good in your lineup, it's kind of like the David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez, that back-to-back combo, or Alex Rodriguez and Derek Jeter even, so where you have 2 players who are just that good in the middle or the top of your order, they just sort of build on each other, and you're always a step ahead when it comes to your offense. So that's gonna be interesting to see, like, who kind of fills into that spot next to Tommy this season.
Whatever Tommy White hit when Dylan Cruz was on base, it was some astronomical number. I don't remember the exact number, but that's that fact is going to be hard to replace. Particularly if whoever's batting ahead of Tommy White, they're not going to get on base as often as Dylan Cruz did, because Dylan Cruz is exceptional.
Right. Right.
So. Yep. Exactly.
This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. Please subscribe. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Stay up to date with everything. That's LSU women's basketball, LSU men's basketball, obviously LSU baseball, and LSU football is going to be entering spring practice here before long. LSU softball, LSU gymnastics, we cover it all. So please stay up to date. To do that, you go to the advocate.com/LSU newsletter to sign up. That's a daily newsletter. Scott Ravelet handles that 3 times a week. Again, the advocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here live every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please subscribe there. If you don't catch us live on those channels or on that YouTube channel, you can always catch us after the fact. So please subscribe there. And we are here, as I said, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And of course, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies, please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, we kind of sort of buried the lead a little bit, but of course we talked about LSU and South Carolina on Monday's podcast extensively. And in just a few short hours, LSU and South Carolina are going to get it on. Number 1 versus number 10. This is, of course, maybe the biggest women's college basketball game of the year, frankly, in terms of the regular season. College game day is coming here. It's the reigning national champions against the number 1 team in the nation. LSU leads the nation in scoring at 91.3 points a game. South Carolina is one of the very best defenses, 29.3% field goal percentage against opponents. And so, Reed, what do you as we get down the stretch here, and we're looking forward to tip off of this game? What are you looking for out of this game, and what do you expect to see happen, and what does LSU have to do to take care of business?
I want to see, the first thing that I'm really going to be looking for is how LSU fares on the defensive end, particularly with South Carolina's 6'7" center Camilo Cardoso. I think if Samaya Smith had never gotten hurt before the season, I'd imagine that she would be in the starting lineup, and Kim Mulkey would give her the primary assignment of defending her, because Samaya Smith, before she got hurt, she really developed into a real solid rim protector. She was playing really well. Obviously, she was the tallest, longest, best, defensive post player on the team, before she got hurt. So now they don't have that luxury of that traditional rim protector that Kim Mulkey wanted in there. So that responsibility is going to fall on Angel Reese. And so I'll be looking. First place I'll be looking is, how does she do defensively against Angel Reese, because against Camilo Cardoso, because LSU needs her to carry so much on the offensive end. They need her to fight so hard for her buckets. She takes so much punishment on the offensive end. So I'll be seeing,
has to work doubly hard because of all the offensive rebounds.
Yeah,
she gets
exactly.
Yeah.
She works, like, her motor is as high as anyone in the country, but it's still a lot to ask of them. When she has to defend someone as big and talented as Cardoso on the defensive end. And on top of that, which we can get into this as well, she'll probably have to play 35 plus minutes, given LSU's, really, lack of trustworthy depth. So that's the first place I'll be watching. And then I think we can also talk a little bit about the depth. How far deep does Mulkey go into her bench? I think that's a good question.
That would be one of my first questions, which is how much, can LSU get, say, 8 minutes, 10 minutes out of Del Rosario? Is that plausible? Is that likely?
Last 2 games, it's been good timing for her, because in my opinion, she's played the 2 best games of her season in the last 2 games. Against Alabama, Angel Reese got in foul trouble, halfway through the second quarter. Del Rosario comes right in, and she gave LSU some really solid minutes, 5 to 7 or 8 minutes or so. And they really, prevented Alabama from really coming in and maybe getting out to a lead over that stretch of time. So she was crucial. She was really good over that stretch. And then against Arkansas, she gave LSU some productive minutes off the bench as well. And in that second quarter stretch that she really comes in and plays 5 or 6 minutes or so, she had a nice block, which led to a Haley Van Lith transition opportunity that ended in a 3-point play. So she has played really well the past couple games, and if she can hang in there against South Carolina and their size, that would be a massive boost for LSU. But again, she's a freshman. You don't know how she's going to react to a type of environment like this. The only way to know is to find out and put her in. So we'll see what happens there.
Is it fair to say, and I'm not breaking any new ground here when I ask this question, really, but is it fair to say that South Carolina has to feel better about their depth than LSU does about their depth at this point in the season?
Yes. Through conference play, through 5 games, South Carolina, they have 9 players who are averaging at least 10 minutes per game. LSU has 6. So they can go 9 or 10 deep fairly easily. And that's big, because LSU is going to have to take their 5 starters, and they're going to have to ask them to play 35 plus minutes a game. So say in the event that, it comes down to a close score, down the stretch, last half of the fourth quarter, how tired are your legs going to be?
Yeah.
In that last stretch of the game, and can you close it out if you need to close it out, or are you going to battle fatigue? So that's another big concern. I think Kim Mulkey can really only trust 6, maybe 7 players off the bench. That's just the way the roster shook out this year. So that's another concern for LSU, and that's another thing that they're going to have to overcome to pull off an upset.
Tell us about backcourt play, specifically Flau'jae and Haley Van Lith. Haley, I don't want to speak for you, but it seemed to me like Haley Van Lith maybe played her best game as an LSU Tiger in the Tigers' most recent win over Arkansas. How big how big are they going to have to come up, Flau'jae and Haley Van Lith, in this game?
Flau'jae more so on the defensive end. I think the role that has kind of shaken out for her this year is that she's that primary defensive stopper that Kim Mulkey was looking for at the end of the year, at the start of the year. Last year, that was Alexis Morris. This year, it's probably going to be Flau'jae. She's going to have to guard who I'd imagine would be Tahina Paopao, South Carolina's top, their point guard, their top backcourt scorer. So I think, Flau'jae's a really good defender. We obviously saw her work against Aaliyah Nye in the Alabama game. Did a great job against her. I think it was in the first half and in the second half. Nye, she hit a lot of tough shots in the first half, but then Flau'jae did a much better job in the second half. So Flau'jae, her contributions come on the defensive end. She's also really good at attacking the rim, attacking closeouts on the offensive end. So LSU trusts her to give them good and solid activity. As far as Hailey Van Lith, I looked back at what she did at Louisville, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, she scored 20 points, at least 20 points a game, at least 20 points in a game, 31 times in 3 years at Louisville. And she took at least 18 shots a game, 17 times in 3 years at Louisville. And it took her until Sunday at LSU to score both 20 points in a game and take 18 shots. So I think what LSU is hoping is that she maybe, for her, something clicked in that game against Arkansas, where she sort of figured out, the right balance of, deferring and being aggressive and taking her shots. I think the offense is at its best when she is attacking downhill and when she is being aggressive and when she is looking for her shot and using that as a complement to Angel Reese and Anissa Morrow in the paint. So maybe, I'll be looking to see how she comes out to start the game. And we'll see, maybe did she figure something out over the weekend against Arkansas? Did she not? I think we'll find out pretty quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. And they need that because, perimeter play and perimeter scoring is something that they haven't really had for much of the season. I think it was the Auburn loss. They only took 2 3-pointers the entire game. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're right. I think, and the other thing is that they have the shooting, right? Hailey Van Lith, Flau'jae, and Michaela Williams, they're all really good 3-point shooters. Just the way they prefer to play, the way that Kim Mulkey has always preferred to play, is feeding the post, getting around the rim, getting to the free throw line, scoring all your points in the paint. And with all the talent you have in the backcourt, that can kind of be somewhat of a dicey situation, because you've got all this talent in the backcourt and you're attacking through the post, which is not a problem because Angel Reese and Anissa Morrow are so good, but it's still a challenging situation to figure out the right distribution of shots. And that's going to be ongoing. It's going to be something that they have to figure out throughout the season. And so we'll see the balance they try to strike tonight.
So what's the right pace of play for LSU Thursday night against South Carolina?
Fast.
They
have to play fast. They're at their best when they play fast. Kim Mulkey loves to play fast. If you just watch her on the sideline, most times when they get a stop, she's waving down the sideline, telling them to go. What are you waiting for? Go. So if they can get stops on defense and then use those stops to get out in transition and run and get easy buckets, get to the free throw line, that would be a great sign for their offense because that's the way they prefer to play. That's when their offense is at their best, when they can really get out in transition and attack. It's really the strength of their team and when they're at their best.
And that really goes back to, and tell me if I'm wrong, but that really goes back to sort of what's Kim Mulkey's priority number one and what has always been priority number one, which is defense.
Yes.
You get to stop. That means you can start running instead of having to take the ball out and get to business.
That's how they want to play. And if they're not getting stops, it becomes really challenging to play that way. So it starts on the defensive end.
So what happens? Let's just play a little bit of a pretend here and do some theorizing. What happens if LSU wins this game in terms of their outlook for the rest of the season? And what happens if LSU is a 9.5-point underdog?
Yes.
What happens if they lose this game? And what's their outlook for the rest of the season?
If they lose this game, I don't think they fall very far in the poll. For what that's worth. South Carolina, they are head and shoulders the best team in the country.
Yes. Undefeated 17. Well, undefeated 17-0, 5-0 in conference.
Yeah.
And they have, I know you're going to know this number off the top of your head, Ray. I know you had this in your story today at theadvocate.com. What's the average margin of victory they've had?
36.6 through 5 games of SEC play.
Not half bad.
No, pretty good. Yeah, they're beating everybody. And when you look at the numbers, it's like, your first instinct is say, oh, these numbers are so good because they haven't played anybody. Well, they have 4 ranked wins.
Yeah.
they beat 4 ranked teams. So it's like they are a powerhouse. They are dominant. If LSU loses this game, that doesn't really change what I think about LSU and their, what they can do this season. If if South Carolina wins, it'll be because they're the better team right now, and they might meet again. They might meet again in the SEC tournament. They might meet again in the NCAA tournament. In that sense, LSU might be a different team because they've had more time to gel. But we're going to see how close LSU is to the 4 or 5 best teams in the country from this game. How close are they right now? I think we'll find out.
It's ironic because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kim said something to this effect when they went to, of course, we all remember the Super Bowl Sunday game they played. South Carolina kind of took it to them in Columbia last year. And Kim, if I'm probably going to get this a little bit wrong, but she said something to the effect of, this is an eye opener. This is indicative of just how far ahead they are of us.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'll put it to you, is that should South Carolina blow these guys out? And I'm not saying they will, but should they do that, is that indicative of just where they are again at this season? And again, not necessarily an indicator of what may happen in April.
My first instinct to that question is to say yes, because on paper, South Carolina's numbers are so much better. Their offensive numbers and defensive numbers are so much better.
I think the defense is a real eye opener.
Yeah.
29.3% opposing field goal.
The defense is their strong suit. If you look at their defensive rating, they're so much better. There's such a huge gap between them and the number 2 team in the country. I don't know who it is off the top of my head, but there's a big gap there. So my first instinct is to answer your question and say yes. But the thing that gives me pause when trying to figure out how this game is going to play out, LSU does have the talent advantage.
Yes.
Their starting 5 is the most talented starting 5, the most talented collection of starters in the country. And
there's
so,
a reason LSU was preseason number 1.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So South Carolina may be more cohesive right now, and they may be, gelling more right now. Dawn Staley's done an insanely good coaching job with this team. They lost 5 starters and replaced them, and now they're, a juggernaut. So it's like, LSU has the talent. They have the talent to do this. They have the talent to win the game. It just comes down to, are they hitting their stride yet? Have they hit their stride yet? Have they figured things out yet? Have they found the right way to optimize that talent?
Have they coalesced?
Correct. Can
Haley Van Lith be a point guard?
Right.
And, can some of their depth pieces step up? Like a Del Rosario and it's just a matter of getting the quote unquote all-star team to work together as a unit. And we saw that work in the Virginia Tech game, but we saw that definitely not work in the Auburn game.
Yep.
So which team is it? Like, that's kind of what I guess LSU fans are looking for, right?
Yeah, I've had a tough time figuring out exactly what they are and who they are at this point. That has to do with a lot of players that miss time. The starters haven't played a ton together. They haven't played a whole lot. So I think they're still trying to figure themselves out. And we're going to find out tonight. Like I said, just how close they are to the very best teams in the country.
LSU is a 9.5 point underdog. Over under is 149.5, depending on where you shop. But certainly this is as big a game as there has ever been in terms of women's basketball on the LSU campus, which is quite a statement considering that, of course, LSU's got a rich history in women's basketball. So we will obviously be watching with both eyes glued to our TV sets on ESPN, or if you're on the Pete Maravich Assembly Center, we'll be watching with both eyes glued to center court.
I'll be there.
Yeah, well, that's good. Reed certainly will be there.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I'll end up making it there or not.
I can fill in for you if you're out.
These two will be there, as will Scott Rabelais, of course, our lead columnist. We will be there. We will have all the coverage as soon as it's over at theadvocate.com. Please subscribe to theadvocate.com, to The Advocate if you have not already, whether that's our print edition or our digital edition. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. You know where to find all our writers' great work, but if you don't already subscribe to The Advocate, please do so. And of course, please subscribe to our LSU newsletter, whether that's baseball, LSU women's basketball, men's basketball, football. Spring football is coming up, of course, recruiting, signing day, such as it is in February. And softball, gymnastics, all that stuff. We are there to give it all to you. So please stay up to date with our LSU newsletter. To sign up for that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please subscribe to that YouTube channel. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us there after the fact. And if you don't catch us there, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever other finer podcasts are found. We are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies, please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. One more thing before we go. This is something we touched on, obviously, on Monday. Reed, you were here for that. But this whole storm in the court issue, of course, it was a big issue with Tulane. They stormed the court, and there was some controversy there with one of the Tulane fans coming in contact with a Memphis player on Sunday. Of course, there was the Caitlin Clark mini controversy at Ohio State after Ohio State upset Iowa. And Kim Mulkey herself actually brought this up in her pregame press conference before the South Carolina game in terms of storming the court, whether you should, whether you shouldn't. And it was very much kind of in congruence with the way you felt on Monday before this whole issue came up. Where do we stand on all that?
Well, Kim Mulkey doesn't want the fans or the students to storm the court if LSU beats South Carolina, because she wants them to act like the defending champions, act like you've been there before. They very much see themselves as peers with South Carolina. So I don't think they'd storm the court, because it wouldn't be that huge of a surprise in their eyes. It wouldn't be that huge of an upset. So Kim Mulkey doesn't want fans to do it. She doesn't want students to do it, which I totally understand. It's just like the past week we've had a lot of these controversies, which I guess builds up to this game. It's such a huge game. Obviously, Caitlin Clark on Sunday, Tulane also on Sunday. The South Carolina men's team, they stormed the court after I couldn't tell you who
they beat Kentucky.
Beat Kentucky. That's right.
Yep.
So
beat them handily too.
Yeah. So South Carolina men's team, and I believe the SEC sort of unveiled like a series of fines. What their system is for fining teams for doing this. I believe first offense, schools get fined at that $100,000. Second offense, it's $250,000, and then it goes up to $500,000 and so on. So if LSU does it, they're going to have to pay a stiff penalty. I don't think they will. But that's it's out there, and it's a possibility.
And it's kind of funny in contrast. I think it's the Big East where I think it's a court storming, and the fine is only $5,000 or something, which is like if everyone put $1 into a bucket, they could fix that pretty quickly.
It just means more here, baby.
Yeah, I guess so.
As you're leaving the court, just put $1 in a jar.
Exactly, and they can fix that
it.
right away.
Yeah.
But no, it's a very tricky issue, and I listened to you guys talk about it the other day, and in basketball at least, there's got to be a way to get the road team off the court and then allow students and whoever to rush the court or rush the field or whatever, and that's probably the biggest danger, right? It's the opposing players getting hurt or potentially hurt, like Caitlin Clark, or trampled by these wild college students. I'll just keep it at wild.
I don't mind telling you, listen, I probably shouldn't even put this out there, but, Dawn Staley, God bless her, one of the greatest coaches of all time, she is kind of public enemy number one in terms of, opposing fans and everything like that. I'm mildly concerned about what happens, should LSU pull the upset here and beat South Carolina. She shouldn't be in that. She shouldn't have to feel like she's in danger, nor should any other coach or any other player or anything like that, any other fan storming the court or anything like that. That's why it's such a touchy issue. You want college to be, a place with passionate fan bases and, people who are into it, and you want people to have fun and not be the fun police and so on and so forth. But there is a safety measure here that's also involved, is it not?
Yeah, and 99.9% of the people who want to storm the court just want to celebrate, want to have fun.
Yeah.
But all it takes is that one person. You never know who's out there. All it takes is that one person to really ruin the fun for everybody. So I think Kim Mulkey was asked yesterday. She said, "Do you think there should be more security? Do you think maybe schools should beef up more security?" And she kind of said, "What's that going to do? I don't think that's going to do anything."
What's true? If you had 100 more security, I mean, this is a you know, it's a hard truth to have to come to. But if you add 100 more security personnel, you're still talking about 14,000, 15,000 people in the stands. If they decide they're going to rush the court, they're going to rush the court.
Yeah, there's not really much you can do. So you know, it's a thorny issue. I think the only thing the coaches can do is sort of get out in front of it, like Kim has done this week, and sort of said, "Hey, not a good idea. Don't do it if we win." So.
Yeah. And but you know, fans are going to do what they're going to do, and even if you do beef up security, it's one security guard for every 8-9 people. That's like best case scenario in terms of ratio. So yeah, it's just a tough. You're not going to stop it, so you might as well try to find ways to, I guess, like slow it down or mitigate it or make it as safe as humanly possible, and that goes for football as well. So yeah, it's there's no great solution for any of this.
It is a thorny issue. We will be here to discuss it all should it happen, though. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. We are here. We are certainly turning the corner towards spring. Baseball is here. We're heading down the stretch for LSU women's basketball, men's basketball, and all that other stuff. So it's here. We are here. We are here, ready to go down the home stretch. So, for Koki Riley, for Reed Darcey, for Robert Young behind the glass, my name is Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.